Welcome to Shake Out Your Sleeves and Go, support for discovering deep joy through the subtle profundity of the Zen way. I'm Dosho, and I'm here today with Shodhin Geiman, teacher at the Chicago Zen Center in Evanston, Illinois. Shodhin Sensei is also a senior research professor of philosophy. He's author of at least two books on Zen, is that right? Obstacles to Stillness is his most recent. Thoughts, Hindrances, and Self-Surrender in
Evagrius.
Evagrius. Evagrius and the Buddha, thank you. And also, which I admit I have not read yet, but I will. Hindrances are really important. And Alone in a World of Wounds, a Dharmic response to the ills of sentient beings, which is an excellent book, highly recommended. I'd say the best Zen book of the decade so far, at least. Really, I'm serious. I think it's an excellent contribution to the Buddha Dharma. Thank you for joining us today, Shodhin. And we'll first have a conversation about the koan way in general, and then we'll look at Record of Going Easy, Case 5. It's Qīngyuán's Price of Rice. So, first of all, how did you get into Zen practice?
Oh, so in our tradition, before we ordain, there's a invitation to give what's called a coming to the path talk, instead of, for a teisho, instead of teisho on a given Sunday. And I remember when I was up for that, I found myself able to cast that coming to the path and coming to Zen 5 different ways. Each one had some air of plausibility about it. Each of one I knew at the end of the day was kind of nonsense and was just my memories being lined up. So the honest answer is I don't really know. I find myself here. Uh, Steps along the way, I don't know. I was interested in already in high school in kind of Eastern Christian contemplative thought. Um, Toyed around. I liked the idea of the quiet religions, Trappists and Quakers who didn't say anything. So that was a value. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s and teaching a team taught course that included some East Asian texts that I read anything Buddhist for the first time. And as I'm getting ready for this class, muttering under my breath because I wasn't trained to do any of this, I didn't know anything about it. Um, it was the old DeBerry's Buddhist tradition book. I mean, now where I'm showing my age here, right?
I'm
Uh,
familiar with that. Yep.
yeah, a long time ago. But I'm turning the pages like it's a crime novel, I couldn't put it down, and I'm nodding along, and I thought, huh, sounds kind of right, and did the usual thing of reading some books, and then finally took the hint, put the book down, go practice. I was living in Valparaiso, Indiana at the time, which of course is not a hotbed of Buddhist practice and study. So it's in the metropolitan area of Chicago. So looked up Zen and found the Chicago Zen Center, came up for an intro and hated it. Was in pain the whole time I was sitting, breaking into a sweat. It hurt so bad. Achy legs all the way home, 70 miles each way. Um, and came back anyhow. And here we are. So,
So you hated it, and yet you came back. How do you understand that? I mean, I hear that a lot. So,
um, quite frankly, I was looking for an ass kicking. There's too many things that tell you you're fine and tell you you're okay. And, on some level, sure, right? We want to have a healthy, functional disposition to get through the day. But on the other hand, I also knew that there was a lot I didn't know and a lot that, I was bringing that wasn't terribly great to the world all the time. And it was that recognition that I needed and wanted to be put through the paces. And just the structure of the practice gives us no quarter for escaping, right? The bell rings and we're still for however long the round is. And I hurt the whole time and did it anyway. And And then in addition to the physical pain, right, the usual thoughts and whatnot come up. And a couple years into it, did a sashimi, and it was horrible, horrible. I was crying in the shower, and just ready to leave any minute. But two things happened then. One, it was the last night of the sashimi, Saturday night, and I remember just being in utter pain. And for the first time, kind of became aware of everybody else in the Zendo. And it dawned on me that we're all like this. We're all doing this, and these people are doing it. And I can honestly say I never understood the word communion until that point in time. We didn't have to talk to each other. We didn't have to say anything to each other, but we had all committed to the task. And I knew they were there, and I was there, and that was enough. And then when it was all over, I walked out and started getting back to day-to-day life, and I can honestly say the sky was never more blue and the leaves were never more green. And I told myself if that's the price of admission to pay, and I know there's more to see, I'm in. So, you
Hmm.
know,
And here you are,
here we
30
are.
years later or
Yeah, I
something.
should have walked out that door the first time. Fool that I am.
No quarter to escape.
No
That's a
quarter.
great
Yes,
line.
no quarter.
So speaking of no quarter to escape, let's look a little bit. This line of questioning comes up because in an email
Yeah.
you mentioned meeting with students, and I thought, oh, that's interesting, a little different than what we do, and so I thought it'd be interesting just to ask you some questions about that. So first off, like we're focused on koan here, so why would a nice person like you offer a koan to a nice person like a student?
I don't offer unless there's some indication that's kind of what they're looking for and they might not know it.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't toss it to somebody out of the blue. Um, so as a rule, a new person coming around the center, right? You get to know them a little bit in the Doksan room, outside the Doksan room. You see them coming back. Um, Generally, those Dokusan's the first year, the usual mechanics about sitting, right? What do I do about my legs? What do I do with the thoughts? All that stuff, right? And I'm waiting to get some whiff of aspiration out of them. Some suggestion that this is more than just a mind-body exercise meant to make me feel good on some level, but really holds out the prospect of insight. And so, for example, I don't think I'm telling secrets out of school here, but the last session we had a person who had practiced at a few other places before, doesn't live in town, uh, signed up for our session, came, and hadn't really worked with a teacher very much. And at one point, several days in, asked him, so what are you looking for here? And he look, eyes went to the ground. If he was standing, he'd have been that kid that shuffles his feet because he knows, he needs to say something and really can't, right? And he's kind of looking and feeling uncomfortable. And he said, "This is going to sound so stupid and so weird." He said, "Awakening." And I said, "Well, it doesn't really sound all that stupid, and we can talk like that around here." And that's where it began. So. I don't think koans are a universal tool. I think they have to be skillfully deployed with the right student. Put in the wrong hands, it's just going to be a source of vexation and frustration. But for someone who however they express it, and again, it does sound weird the first time you say it, hi, I'm here because I have aspiration towards awakening. That's not our everyday form of speech, and the fact that they've got chutzpah enough to actually put those words out there already, is an indication that there's something going on there. And at that point, I said, all right, here's what we have as an option, and start talking about what it would mean to work with the koan and whatnot, and send them off with, as usual, Joshu's move. And then we see what happens, we see what happens. Um,
How much of the teacher's job would you say? What percentage, roughly speaking, of the teacher's job
Will it affect my pay?
is no is waiting? You said you were waiting. I just love that. And so, how much of that do you know?
I mean, you asked why I kept coming back, even though it hurt, and even though, I hated it and everything else, but I found myself coming back anyway, right? Something was going on that didn't fit the usual patterns of self-care, let's say, right? Usually if we're going in for something that's going to cause us that much difficulty and that, much effort, we tend to excuse ourselves from that and go the other direction. But if somebody is showing those signs where something's inside there that doesn't know what to do, but knows it's got to find its expression somehow. It's got to, that inquiring mind has been awakened. They've heard tell of, you know, they've done their reading in Buddhism and whatnot, and they've heard about this thing called awakening, and part of them says, I want in on that. What do I have to do? I want in on that. Um, I can wait forever. It doesn't affect my my life terribly much. There'll be little nudges along the way, right? You see them, that this is one of the benefits of frequent doksan is having that ability to get to know them on that level
Yeah.
and really, line up the words they say over a course of months to see what the trajectory is there. Again, they may not know how to phrase it, but I could suss it out usually.
Hmm.
Um,
When you
somebody
say
who,
frequent, what do you mean? Frequent Dokusan? How often do you usually see koan students?
it depends on the student. Um, I was thinking about this the other day, right? So all kinds of people come to our intro nights. Once a month, we have an intro night, basic how to sit, when to stand up, what this bell means, and get them ready so that they show up. They're not a discipline problem in the Zendo. And most of those never come back. I'm guessing we're not alone in that. A lot of people have some idea about Zen, right? And they find out, like I did, it's more work, and they say no, thank you. And well, people like me came back.
Aiken Roshi once said that it took 2,000 to go through the door to get one that stayed 10 years.
Yeah, I 100% believe that. Um, so again, then it's okay, so they're coming around to sit for a while, and since we offer Doksan at every scheduled sitting, they know there's an announcement, there's the bell, they know people are leaving the Zendo, they know the bell is ringing downstairs as one student after another goes into the Doksan room, coming back to the Zendo, but they're not going down themselves yet. So our Zendo's on the second floor, the Doksan room's on the first floor, that's why I say down. Um, and then something stirs and they find themselves coming down. And of course, it's I don't know what to talk about kind of stuff. And I tell them, anything related to practice. Uh, and then again, usually the mechanical questions, legs, breath, thoughts. Um, let's say there's, person X who comes in, I don't know, just for the sake, let's start the year in January. He comes in January for the intro night, right? And then they start, maybe we see him again once or twice in January. We see them a little more often in February. Let's say by springtime, right, they're starting to come around a little more frequently. They've been coming maybe on a Tuesday night. Now they come on a Sunday, so then they hear a Tay show, right? They take part in a chanting service. This goes on for a little bit. They start doing Doksan. It may be a year or two before we even get into the neighborhood of talking koan practice.
Mhm. And once they start doing koans, how often
Well, and
do
okay,
you
so that now,
recommend? How often would you like
yes,
to see?
so then we've got another, separation. Uh, some get it. So, I don't even know how to explain. Some get it, man, and it just captures them. Like
Mhm.
they can't shake it. They haven't gotten to red hot iron ball stage yet, but this is the pesky little something or other that won't leave them alone, and then they start coming down, right? Because this is eating at them a little bit. This is actually doing some work, right? And they want to know what to do. I don't know that I have numbers, but it's as if that koan begins to slightly take some hold, you see what happens, right? And then they find out, well, they want to talk about this, and then then we start gently throwing out some peripheral testing questions just to see where they are. Um, and some people they put a lot of their life on hold and get here as often as they can. I mean, some of it's family commitments and whatnot. I don't know that I have a number, but um, somebody who's working on a koan is probably not going to get very far very fast or go very deep. If I'm not seeing him at least 3, 4 times a month, at least once a week. Um,
Now we say the same.
yeah. And then there's more, there's some that are here, they do all the each we have 2 early morning sittings during the week and they'll do those plus Sunday. Um, so I'll see them a little more frequently. Some of them it just leads to frustration because nothing's budging on their side, right?
And
And
what budges it? What budges it? You said the iron ball, the red hot iron ball, and so there's intention. There's what what variables. What would you tell a student that's in that place of kind of being stuck? They're not penetrating the koan.
yeah, be stuck. Be really stuck. Um, so I've only been in the teacher's seat for 4 years now, I guess. Um, and I suppose maybe in 10 years I'll have a different answer, right? When I have 14 years and that many different students and whatnot, um, when I've worked with that many people. But the metaphor I keep coming back to, the imagery I keep coming back to is I'm really nothing more than a midwife. I can't induce labor in them. I can't, I don't have, if it's not ready, it's not ready. Bringing out premature babies isn't very good either. I had twins that were 6 weeks preemie, I know. Um, uh, Watch, wait, um, you know, healthy habits. I don't know what.
How much zazen do you think is necessary? What do you tell people in terms of just the pure volume? I know in some Zen circles it's not necessarily fashionable to quantify it like that, but what do you say about that? If somebody says to you, "How much zazen do I need to be sitting?" What's as someone once said to me, "What's the minimum?"
Yeah. I've been hanging around, even though I've only been in the teacher seat for 4 years, I've been hanging around the place for just about 30. So I've seen a lot of people. I ordained in 2010, so you get to know a little more about their practice because you see them all the time, and even though you're not their teacher. I knew people that sat hour and a half every day, an hour in the morning, half hour in the evening or something like this, just every day. Life didn't start without sitting, got absolutely nowhere with their practice. I know people and I was kind of one of them, was never terribly eager to go into that Zendo. My first session, I was, the warning sound would go off and I'd get another drink of water just to avoid going in there. Oh, I think I gotta pee again, give me another minute, right? All right, I gotta go in now. Um, I really don't know how to answer that because I know people who've sat for decades and gotten nowhere. And I know people who for whom this has just taken over a place in their life on and off the mat.
Hmm.
And those are the ones, right, that just find themselves in the middle of a Saturday afternoon doing the dumbest thing, all of a sudden just find themselves in moo.
Hmm.
Um, they're not trying to do it. They're not saying, all right, sit down now and set the timer. Um, it's taken root. And what am I going to tell them? We need that they're there. They're doing the work, it's Zazen off the mat. I don't know.
It is notable that there's so few Kensho stories with people that are on the cushion. Most, I mean, there are some, but Dogen, for example, but there are few.
Very few. And I've built that into my, opening sashimi talk. Don't think it has to happen between the first bell that starts this and the dead beat at the end that, wraps it up. Whoever came up with that idea? I have seen people, it wasn't here, it was at another center. Sashimi ended and they're breaking in tears because they hadn't had Kensho yet. And I'm thinking, who told you it's over? Why is that a wall that it's worth crying over? It might happen 3 weeks from Tuesday. Why are we putting it into it has to happen within the confines of Sashimi, or it has to happen on the mat? I just I
I think that's a good point, and yet a student that would cry at the end of Sashine, I would like that personally, rather than
well, I would
to
say
YouTube.
part of the reason they're probably not getting anywhere is they're a little too attached to it. So maybe they need to lighten up. I don't know. I didn't know the student. I had didn't, this was just a person sitting next to me in the Zendo. I'm thinking, why the hell are you crying? And then I caught wind in a discussion that they're like, oh my stars. Um, every moment's a gateway of awakening.
Yeah.
Yes, we sit a lot. Um, but I refuse to, I'd rather think of us as the Buddha Mind School, which is one of the names that we get this from, rather than the Zazen school, the just meditation school.
Yeah.
I think that's more fecund. And, when that Buddha mind awakens and the student comes to me and in crazy sounding words tells me they want to wake up, that warms my heart a lot more than them telling me they've been sitting X number of minutes or hours a day. Um, yeah.
So Buddha Mind School. So let's transition to the Buddha Mind here
All
with
right.
a monk asking Qīngyuán, what's the great meaning of the Buddha Dharma? Qīngyuán saying, what is the price of luling rice? What's going on here?
Well, you know what's going on, and I know what's going
What can you say about it? as a
on.
teaser, if nothing else.
Well, it's right. It's that little thread that you start yanking on that pretty soon is going to have the whole universe, right at your doorstep, because you get Lu Ling and then you get rice and then you get the price, right? And each one of those has causes and conditions and antecedents and how these work together. The next thing you know, um, the price of rice and Lu Ling is a complete flawless demonstration of the Dharmakaya sitting right in front of you.
Yeah.
And what else do you need? Um,
Just by dumb luck, I think it really complements your point quite well that you were just making.
what's that?
About it's not zazen isn't special or precious.
Yeah.
Here's a koan about the price of rice and the price of gas at the local holiday. You know,
Right? It's what are they getting for Costco for a gallon these days, right? What are eggs up or down to these days?
it's right there.
It's right there. But also, I think particularly in our context, I think it's telling that this is, let's just say, a socioeconomic framing, right? Prices are arbitrary, right? There's market forces. Um, Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. Sometimes there's a government subsidy. Sometimes there were locusts in the field or whatever they had for plagues. Sometimes there's a glut on the market. Sometimes all kinds of things happen, but it's a commodity. It's not just rice plants in Luling, right? That would be too pretty, right? It's down there in hard cold cash, and hard cold cash strikes us. It's kind of like the mangy dog. We can't see Buddha nature in it, right? Because, oh no, it can't be like that. But Yeah, it is like this. It has to do with market forces, and it has to do with the absurdity of market forces and the absolute silliness of charging money for groceries when you get down to it at the end of the day. And but we put our stuff on the conveyor belt and we go through the checkout or check out ourselves, whatever, and we swipe our card or hand over the cash and we walk off with our bags, and nothing's missing. And it's we don't do this as a preliminary exercise to get on with the real business of life. That is the real business of life right there. And some days you go into the grocery store and the price is too steep for your blood, right? And so you just put it back on the shelf and walk away. And that too, it's just the Dharmakaya. Um,
Great meaning, is that the koan? What's the question here for the koan?
great meaning
Yeah,
of
the
Buddha,
great
great
meaning of the
meaning of the
Buddha
Buddha
Dharma.
Dharma.
The great meaning, it could also be translated, I believe, if I remember the characters right, the big idea. What's the
Yeah,
big idea of the Buddha Dharma?
right.
And so
It-
what are you saying then? What's the big idea?
well, there ain't one. Not the kind you're looking for anyway, right? Uh, there's no behind the scenes deeper meaning. There's no when one really sees the price of rice and luling for what it is, plainly, and then looks in one's pocket and decides if one could buy it today or not, plainly. Um, Nothing separate or outside, nothing precious, nothing holy, nothing um special. I mean, this is in the clearly in the line with all the other koans, the shit stick, the oak tree in the garden, right? All these things that just point us right back
Mount
to
Sumeru.
Mount Sumeru. But I love the socioeconomic thing because we tend to think, oh, now that, we can work on, I might not be able to do much about Mount Sumeru, but dang it, I can work to lower the prices. I can petition Congress or whatever. I'm not going to get into too deep in those waters, but there's some suspicion that this is tweakable in my favor. And it's somehow not a great day if it's not been tweaked in my favor. And that's the truth of reality too.
Well, I'd like to dry you out on that point anyway, somehow. Um, because in your book, I think one of the things in the Alone in a World of Wounds book, you have this very, very powerful theme that you come back to that's so congruent with the Buddha Dharma, the received tradition, but I'd say either unknown or unpopular, which is, I think, what you say in your intro also, that that the world isn't fixable.
Right.
So
So think of all the metaphors we have in the West historically, without just prejudice, just historical what's out there about the idea of nature as a mechanism. There's the famous thing about God, the clockmaker who winds it up, lets it tick, right? No further intervention. So deism. Um, the ideas of God that come in and tinker with, the sweep second hand or something to put it back on schedule. There's always this idea that this business that we are living in is somehow governed by some order in light of which it can continually be better calibrated, for lack of a better word. That, it should work like this, but oh, we got this little problem. We could fix that and make it work just like that, just so. And on small scales, that's not a wrong way of operating. When I try to start the lawnmower and it's not working, I futz around with it, then kick it a few times, and then see if I can't get the thing to start. Um, so if the world were as small as a contraption, and the world's relationship to something had that contraption's relationship to me, then we might talk about fixability. But when there is no discernible author of the universe, and there's no discernible um, trajectory to the universe aside from the ceaseless unfolding of causes and conditions that continually work upon one another, what does fix mean? What's the metric that I'm using to determine how near or far it is from this ideal norm, and where did that idea come from? And so, again, in a small scale, I can speak of such things. So would it be better if, there's 10 people in the room, if all 10 got food rather than only two of them? Well, sure, I could say that, we'd all get to eat. And is it better if the two in the room aren't keeping food from the other eight? Sure, I mean, we can do those small little, moralities of arrangement. But when it comes to the world, I don't know, I mean, I don't know that there's a wraparound concept, power, whatever, that allows us to talk about fixing.
Well,
And
what about suffering beings then? What is the great idea of the Buddha Dharma then?
well,
You know,
there's suffering, I do just, this is a word, and I'm really sticking with this. The distinction I make in the book, I don't make a lot out of it, but there is hardship. Hardship is a fact of conditioned existence. If I'm up at a certain elevation, it will be harder for me to breathe because there's less oxygen in the air. A being such as I am functions really well at one atmosphere with the amount of oxygen available at sea level. Too far above, too far below, I run into difficulties. That's because of my constitution. Other animals do much better at 12,000 feet than I do because of their constitution. Put that animal down in the valley, it's going to have some difficulties. There is hardship. Not all causes and conditions are optimally set to maximize my continued existence. That should not be news to any breathing human being. We are all mortal. We are all subject to disease. It comes with the turf. I had cancer when I was 29, so somebody, oh, if you ever wonder why you got cancer, and I said, I was born as a human, and the kind of cancer I got is one that develops within human bodies. And I'm not alone in this, right? They had a diagnosis code ready for it because it's not personal. This is what happens to X 100,000 people in a year. We always believe it's not going to happen to me, but we all know it happens to 200,000 people a year, or whatever figure it might be for the given case. We can't escape that kind of hardship. It's just built into our finitude.
mhm.
So
So
if the
that's
Buddha,
one great idea that the Buddha Dharma has, that there is hardship, aka suffering, right?
but there's suffering, there's dukkha that comes from the incessant whininess that wishes all this were different, that things did
Mhm.
line up better for me. And now I take offense that I'm one of those 200,000. And now I wonder, well, what forces were against me? I didn't deserve this. I might say to myself, if I really take umbrage at the fact that I catch some disease or another. And that's what the Buddha Dharma can talk about. Where's that coming from? The fact that you have organs that fall apart is just the way organs are. The fact that you are self-incurring dukkha by clinging to a certain conception of what you would rather be instead, that, however, is delusion. And we can talk about that. So I don't think the Buddha is not on record for having fed record numbers of people. We don't. I mean, the Christians may have that. I mean, Jesus had loaves and fishes and turned it into a banquet. We don't get that kind of stuff in the Buddha Dharma. The Buddha isn't feeding the masses, and quite frankly, even among Christians, they'll say that's metaphorical, right? He didn't really have bread that somehow multiplied, and the fish didn't multiply in number.
Well, that's disappointing.
I know, right?
Now you tell me.
Oh well. It's been a long time since you were in Sunday school, son.
That's
Uh,
been.
but if we distinguish hardship from dukkha, it begins to make a lot more sense. My dad died this past December. He had had Alzheimer's for the last couple of years. I had some of the best conversations I ever had with him those last couple of years. Just a joy to be with. Just said things that, were unfiltered, and they were, but in turns beautiful. That I don't think if he'd had his wits about him, he'd have probably filtered those out rather than just letting it go on, right? I don't know, it was just a joy. But I watched my mother
Mm,
just pulling her hair out because she couldn't abide the idea that he would look out the window, see deer, and call them cows.
mm,
Ma, just let them call them cows. They're not cows. Mom, this is what Alzheimer's looks like. Just
mm.
smile and nod.
So, so smile and nod. Yeah. How about
Smile and nod. Call it.
how's that different than is back to the what's the great idea of the Buddha Dharma? So there's acceptance of this. There is hardship, and you're saying suffering is optional, essentially. Is that what you're
I
saying?
will, I want to keep dukkha because suffering gets sloppy because people will say, well, hardship is suffering. And so I'm willing to use the D word for this.
I like using the traditional terms because the translations often slide off of some
Yes,
of
they
these
do.
key things in a way
Yes, they
that's
do.
not helpful. So
So,
there is. Go ahead.
yeah. And so, I mean, the price of rice and noodling, how much do we fret over the cost of things or, the current socio-political situation? I'm not even going to mention names, but I don't have to. We all know how much this is, we have this idea that other governments rise and fall, other countries rise and fall, other peoples rise and fall, but we're somehow immune from this.
Mhm.
We're not. We're not.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe there's not a quick fix. And the forces that made it possible, quite frankly, are down to people living next door to you you would never suspect would entertain some of these ideas. And what are you going to do with them? You want to knock on every door, pull them out, and send them to, I don't know, rehabilitation camps? The Chinese tried that, but I don't think we want to do that either. Um, what is this? Is there a solution? Is there a fix that you really want to enact without?
One of the stories you tell in the book is this difference, and I think this is, this, where as Buddhism comes into the global culture, so to speak, then you've got these various paradigms that kind of are kicking in to play, and this Western notion, powerfully influenced by Christian metaphors. And for example, though, I'm thinking of the story of I don't remember the woman's name, but she loses her son,
Yeah,
and she infant son, I think.
Tommy, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and you point out that although when Lazarus died, Jesus cried, Buddha doesn't cry.
No, he doesn't.
That's very interesting, I think.
He doesn't cry. He doesn't say, "Yeah, I told you he'd come back." He he puts her square into the face of confronting dukkha. Is there anybody else? Is there a household in town that hasn't known death?
Hmm.
And then you realize, like I was saying before, with maybe getting a disease, it's not personal. The death of her son's not personal. That doesn't mean it doesn't affect her more than all the rest. I mean, I understand this. The danger of talking about some of this is you really come across as a real hard ass and really cold hearted. I really don't want to do that. But at the end of the day, right? What are we going to tell people? And what is
Well,
it?
what did the Buddha
What
offer
did the
her?
Buddha say? Yeah, bring me a seed from a house that doesn't know death. And she goes door to door and doesn't find one. And finally, she realizes this is a dumb exercise. He's dead. My neighbors lost their grandpa. The ne next door neighbors lost their dad. Who knows what, right? Every house has tasted this. And when
And
you
then she
know
becomes a
that,
nun, right?
and then
And
she becomes a nun. Well, everybody comes monastic sooner or later. So,
and she
we'll
awakens.
keep it.
So that's where I'm going with it. she
What?
she awakens also.
Yeah,
So
yeah. She
it's
does awaken. Right, right. And that that's the Buddha releasing her from her suffering, not by changing her mind, but by letting her confront square on the reality of hardship, its inescapability, and the futility of wishing it were otherwise. And once that happens, done.
it's as if it really were the price of gas at the local
It is.
holiday.
No, it really is. It
Yeah.
really is. It's as simple as that. So there was a period in my life where don't need to go into details. Let's just say there was a period in my life where I had a salary job, so I knew there would be a paycheck on Friday. But it was Wednesday. I had literally $3 to my name, none in any other account, just three ones in my wallet, enough gas to get to work and back, and two cans of soup to make it to Friday. It's not a lot. Um, those were some of the best years for my practice because, two cans of soup in the pantry it is, and $3 in the wallet it is. And um, if you're hungry, you're gonna have to wait till Friday. And, there was a Friday, but there might not have been either. I could have lost the job too. Didn't. But we go to great pains to insulate ourselves from hardship, and thereby maintain our dukkha, curiously enough. And that, in the Buddhist tradition, this is a bit in the second book. This is where kind of some of the links with the fourth century Christian tradition come in. They were all renunciants. I mean, they came face to face with the difficulty of making it through the day. When you're begging your food and there's not much in town, there's not going to be much in your begging bowl. If the whole town is suffering famine, you might not get much at all if they're going to feed their kids first and they don't want to feed the monk coming by. And what is the injunction to the monks? You accept whatever's given. And some days it's more, some days it's less. And you may die as a result of not getting enough food. That you may. Um, and that's one of the prices one pays for entering into that realization. I may not be able to afford the rice and I always want to say ruling because the R and the L issue, right? So I'm being caught up in that. But I might not be able to afford the gas at the pump in Skokie either. All right, I'm not going on vacation then. Can I live with that without grumbling? For starters, we're not even talking about living that way with joy yet. Um, but think of Ryokan, who maybe he had some wine, maybe he didn't. Maybe he had some food, maybe he didn't. Think of all the stories we tell in Buddhist lore, where what's the one nun that was refused lodging, so she spends the night under the cherry tree and sees it come to bloom in the middle of the night. And she says, through the kindness of the strangers in refusing me lodging, I beheld the cherry and blossom or something. The kindness of strangers in refusing me lodging. Can we
But it
see
always
that?
doesn't turn out happily. I think that's
No, but it
the
doesn't.
point you're making
But
too,
it
is
doesn't
that
either. Right.
there are these examples, but at the same time, that's kind of the second step, being willing to throw yourself completely into practice, and it doesn't necessarily work out. At the workshop a
And
couple weekends ago, somebody said that, like, how did you do this difficult stuff? How did it turn out all right? Well, in some ways, it didn't turn out all
at all. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, everybody loves reading Shanti Deva, but I mean, let them take my body, beat it up. What do I care, right? I mean, it's hardly a happy day on a certain way of looking at things, but if one has really set oneself to, you know, ego attrition, which is really what, this is about at the end of the day, in order to see anything, we have to get ourselves out of the picture, uproot that conceit of the self. That's the source of all our trouble. Um, if I'm really going to take that seriously, why am I concerned about this body? Why am I concerned about the money in my wallet? And I can hear Shanti David now. See, I've freely given everything over to them. Let them do what they want. And we all, on some level, know that. I think part of the reason that book is still in print and still gets a lot of play is because we read that and there's something inside us that says, yes, that is so, 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 so right. And then we turn around and start bitching about all kinds of stuff. and,
And yet, why'd you do that to me?
or we'll find something else to complain about. There's no I mean, that's the thing. There's no shortage of things to complain about if I think there's always something to fix. I will never be content.
How about what last thing do you want to say about this koan?
Oh, I mean, we've got a monk and we've got Qīngyuán here, right? So we're already within the framework of home leaving practice, right? By definition, he's a monk. Uh, Monk or non-monastic, lay ordained, doesn't matter. We never really leave this world of rice pricing. Um, and we court a certain kind of delusion in thinking none of that's our concern, or we don't need to bother with that, or we're doing something better because we're not paying attention to the price of rice.
Mm.
And, I think here that, the monk is being asked, what is the price today? Um, it's understood that that monk knows what's going on in the world.
Mm.
They spend extra part of their day in practice. They don't have kids to, change diapers on, and if they're, well, by China, they're harvesting their own food. But, if the crop fails, they're still hungry monks. And if the emperor decides to disband the monasteries, right, they're out of luck completely anyhow. So even that's precarious, and we live in that world all the time. We're never excused from that. And this is where we see, again, the unity of samsara and nirvana. Nirvana is not other than the world of rice and prices and all the rest. And nirvana is not impeded by the price of rice. And this idea that either we have to leave the world of everyday life and become a recluse, or we have to work like the Dickens to line up all causes and conditions in the social environment in order to practice, both suffer from the same delusion. The awakening and everyday life are separate.
Hmm. And I appreciate you closing with that because the monastic narrative is so powerful in Zen, and so it's natural, I suppose. But the people then have this ideal about monastic life that if only I was a monk, then I could do this work. Same damn problems.
Same damn
I've
problem.
been there. It's the
Yeah,
same
no.
damn problems.
No, that's it's one thing I'm kind of kicking around is kind of another project somewhere, and there's really just getting over this monastic versus lay distinction. And we find all kinds of cutish ways of going around it. I'm sorry, if you've got a family, a job, and kids, you don't get the word monk attached to you. That just tortures the
I
language.
agree.
I just
I
call it
agree.
something else, but not that. And then, yeah, the whole mystique about monk life. I was in formation, Roman Catholic formation for a while. I know the inside of seminaries, so I'm under no illusions about what real life,
Yeah,
religious do and how that goes. And
yeah. It's maybe a different lifestyle, but not all that different. Same concerns. So
exactly.
we also try to diffuse that as much as we can, and also try to avoid the whole fantasy about and we're not monks, even though I'm ordained. I'm not a monk. I live in a nice place. I'm married, So this is not what. And 99 point some percent of people who are interested in this practice are not monastics now. The numbers are dropping in terms of they
Oh yeah.
continue to drop in terms of the number of people that are doing
I
monastic
mean,
life.
it'll never be a go-to profession, but it's gotten particularly bad. But also, just that's one thing I do early on in the book is, we're invited to practice as noble disciples, and it doesn't matter if we're lay or ordained. We were all
Yes.
called to the realization of the Four Noble Truths. We're all called to the overcoming of dukkha. And in that, having a belly button is the only requirement you need to get in and a pulse, right? But you don't have to have robes. You don't have to have vows. It's not that they aren't helpful. I wouldn't dispense with this. I've got kit too. Um, and it does its job. But it's the fact that I'm a human being that makes this practice possible, not anything else.
The belly button. I like that.
Uh,
We have a little tradition at the end of shaking out our sleeves and leaving.
All
So
right. So I've got to sleep
you,
too.
you
All right. I'm gone.
thank you.